We make a good point that, our supply chain is deeply dependent on China. But so what would you suggest is the solution for that? It can't be quick or easy to break our dependence on China.
Well, it may not be either, but it has to be done because our dependence on China gives that mortal enemy a means of essentially finishing off what's left of our economy, as you know. I think there are measures that have begun to be adapted. Some of them are simply creating manufacturing, production, and the rest kinds of capabilities here in the United States. But what people are doing, I think, in increasing numbers is also looking to other countries outside of China where they might be able to get relatively low-cost labor and productive capacity online more quickly than they can in this country. I'm not as enthused about that as I am just onshoring it fully here, but it as a stepping stone to getting those supply chains back here, I think it's a necessary step. And can I just say, I had a fascinating conversation. You mentioned kindly our television show, Securing America. I had a very interesting interview the other day with Ross Kennedy. I don't know if you've had him on China Uncensored, but I encourage you to do so. He's a logistician and sort of strategist in the supply chain space that has been working in the food industry in particular. And I think, again, unbeknownst to most of us, we are now unbelievably dependent upon China for another supply chain, in addition to medicine, which I should have mentioned earlier, which is also insane. Food products, finished food in some cases, but also the ingredients for making food and the feed for the animals that we rely upon for food and the fertilizers that we require to grow our own crops are, to varying degrees, dependencies that we have on China as well. And as Ross pointed out, there are basically three things that you cannot rely on anybody else for. One is potable water, another is food, and a third is energy. And to the extent that we're doing at least the second and third with the Chinese, this is reckless in the extreme.
So you're saying we at least have water?
Well, we do at the moment, but with the rate that the Chinese are buying up land, and I assume water rights as well, that may even be imperiled, if you can believe it, as well.
Well, also with, massive pollution from China, we can also, that'll eventually have an effect on our water supply as well.
Well, it's worse than that. And again, I think you've focused on this over the years, but it's not well enough known that one of the facets of the Chinese agenda, and I think it was most directly spoken to in a famous speech given to party cadre back in the 2002-2003 timeframe, I believe, by Chi Hao-qian, who was the then defense minister of China, talking about in his own right, but also by reference to Deng Xiaoping, the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party back in the early 1990s, as talking about the agenda of the Chinese not simply being dominating the world, not simply recognizing that they have to get rid of the United States in order to do that, but that they seek to do it in a way that depopulates the United States so that they can colonize it. So that, to your point about the horrible environmental damage they've done to China, the impetus for finding areas of the world where they can still grow things, where they still can find potable water, where the air can still be breathed, in which to relocate parts of their population, is a particularly chilling reason to be urgently rethinking these ideas that we can safely engage, to say nothing of enrich and empower and embolden the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, that sounds like the plot to every alien invasion movie where they conquer one planet and then they take the resources and destroy it and then move on. And now they're coming for Earth.
Yeah. Well, I'm fond of, it's not, my insight, but to your point, this is the Borg that we're dealing with, sort of Star Trek fame. This is a monster of truly horror film caliber, operating on a scale that most of us can't imagine, and with a determination to achieve its ends that is, well, horrifying. Yes.
Why do you think the American public is largely unaware of how big the threat and danger is?
I think it's because, despite your best efforts and folks like me and our Committee on the Present Danger of China and a few others, they've been incessantly told not to worry by the people who they assume know what they're talking about. Look no further than the Biden administration. And this is worth a show in its own right, and I know you've done them, but the extent to which we are continuing to hear from President Biden and members of his team that the Chinese Communist Party is not our enemy. And let me make the distinction that I think you guys often make, that it's not all the Chinese. It's the party. It's the leadership of the party, most especially, that is our determined and relentless enemy. You're not going to hear those words pass from Joe Biden's lips. Yes, he might talk about them as competitors or, a challenge or something, some euphemism, but enemy, no. So what's the public to think? Other than that, well, the people who are responsible for assessing the nature of this challenge, this competitor, surely know what they're talking about. Well, for one thing, we're getting a short course as we speak about the degree to which whatever Joe Biden thinks about the Chinese Communist Party, what he says about the Chinese Communist Party seems to be a product of his being deeply compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. What we're learning from the sort of forensic dive into the entrails of Hunter Biden's laptop, being led now by Jack Maxey and others that he's sort of browbeaten into following suit, including now, amazingly, the New York Times and the Washington Post, is that it isn't just Hunter Biden. It isn't just Joe Biden's brother or other family members. It's the big guy himself who has been on the take from China. So is it any wonder that he is not telling us the truth about the danger it poses? I think not. Is the public alive to that just yet? I'm not sure. But as I said earlier, I think that they are deeply now suspicious in their own right because, let's face it, I think just about every single one of us has had our lives touched in one way or another by this so-called COVID-19 pandemic. So all of that is operating here, I think, Chris, and to the extent it is, I think even if we're not being told by the people who are responsible for alerting us to these dangers, there's now a sort of grassroots up movement building that says we cannot rely on China. We cannot rely on people who have been suborned by China. We have to stand up. We have to prepare ourselves. I hope the next step is we have to get on what I've long believed is needed, namely a war footing